The wind howled across the Wyoming plains, rattling the shutters of a lonely ranch house that stood against the storm, like a ghost from another time. Inside, a single lantern flickered, throwing restless shadows across the wooden walls. Elias Ward paced the creaking floorboards, his arms trembling as he held a bundle wrapped in a faded quilt. His newborn daughter's cries pierced the roar of thunder, raw and desperate, as though the whole wide land could hear her grief. Elias whispered her name again and again, voice breaking. "Hush now, little one." Hush, but she would not be soothed. The fire in the hearth had long gone out, and the room felt colder than the wind outside. Every corner of the house carried the echo of his late wife, her laughter, her song. Her warmth now gone. Alone beneath that endless, merciless sky, Elias felt the silence of the frontier closing in, broken only by the cry of a child who'd never know her mother. Morning came slow over the Wyoming prairie, the kind of dawn that bled gold through the mist and revealed more emptiness than promise. The Ward Ranch sat miles from the nearest town, a weathered spread of fence posts, broken corrals, and grass that hadn't seen rain in weeks. Elias stepped outside with his daughter in his arms, the chill biting through his coat. The land stretched forever, silent except for the mournful groan of the wind and the distant call of a lone crow. 2 months had passed since Clara's death, but her presence lingered like a ghost in every room, her shawl still draped over a chair, her perfume faint in the baby's blanket. The cattle were thinning, the roof leaked, and the bills piled higher than the haystacks. Yet Elias stayed, not for the ranch, but for the tiny heartbeat resting against his chest, the last piece of her he had left. The days bled together, one wine-bitten sunrise after another, as Elias fought to keep his baby alive. The milk he'd stored was running low, and the nearest general store in Mill Creek was 2 long days' ride through mud and frost. He'd tried feeding her bits of watered-down broth, but she turned her face away, crying until her voice went hoarse. Each cry tore through him like a blade, a cruel reminder of the promise he couldn't keep to protect Clara, to bring her safely through the birth. Some nights he thought he heard her voice in the wind, whispering his name, begging him not to give up. But the world outside had grown colder. Neighbors rode by without stopping, muttering that Elias Ward had lost his senses, talking to ghosts instead of men. Alone beneath the endless gray sky, Elias wondered if they were right. Across the wide valley, where the cottonwoods bent in the wind, Martha Lane kept her small cabin neat and quiet, just as it had been since her husband's death 2 winters ago. She'd learned to live with silence until it began to carry another kind of sound. On certain nights, when the wind swept right, she could hear it faint and mournful, the crying of a baby drifting through the cold. From her window, she often saw a lone lantern flickering in the Ward house, burning long after midnight. Folks in town said Elias Ward was going mad from grief, but Martha didn't believe in madness born of love. She knew the ache of an empty bed, of meals set for 2 that stayed untouched. One evening, heart-pounding, she filled a small basket with goat's milk, warm bread, and a quilt she'd sewn from her late husband's shirts, and whispered, "Maybe it's time." The morning broke cold and gray, a thin frost glazing the porch steps as Elias paced with his wailing child pressed to his chest. His hands shook from exhaustion, his eyes hollow from nights without sleep. The cabin smelled of smoke and sorrow, and the fire refused to catch. Then, through the sound of the baby's cries, came something strange, a gentle knock at the door. Elias froze. No one had come by in weeks. He opened it slowly, half expecting the wind, and found Martha Lane standing there, her cheeks pink from the cold, a bottle of warm milk steaming in her hands. "She needs feeding," she said softly, voice trembling. For a moment, neither spoke. His pride fought the instinct to close the door, but the sight of the milk and the kindness in her eyes broke something inside him. Wordlessly, he stepped aside, and she walked into the dim, silent house. Martha moved carefully, her every motion calm and practiced, like someone who had once known the rhythm of caring for life. She took the baby from Elias's trembling arms, settling her gently against her shoulder. The cries softened to little whimpers as Martha guided the warm milk to the infant's lips. The sound that followed, a small, steady suckling, filled the room like music. Elias stood still, watching, his rough hands useless at his sides. his heart breaking and healing all at once. For weeks, that house had known only silence and sorrow, but now, for the first time, there was peace. He cleared his throat. I can't thank you enough," he said, his voice low, cracking under the weight of the words. Martha smiled faintly, her eyes glinting in the firelight. "No need," she whispered. "We all lose something out here. Sometimes helping is the only way to keep breathing." They sat by the hearth as dusk crept in, sharing quiet stories of love and loss, the kind no one else would understand. Outside, the wind eased, and the flames painted their faces in gold. Between them, something fragile began to stir, not romance. Not yet, but the faint, unmistakable promise of hope. By nightfall, the wind had turned vicious, sweeping snow across the valley until the world outside vanished in white. The storm came sudden and hard, sealing Martha inside the Ward ranch. The windows groaned beneath the gusts, and the chimney moaned like a ghost. Elias set another log on the fire, glancing toward her with an uneasy smile. "Looks like you're staying the night," he murmured. Martha nodded, pulling her shawl tighter, the firelight flickering across her thoughtful face. Hours passed in quiet conversation. Elias spoke of sleepless nights, of hearing Clara's voice in every creak of the floor. His words trembled, heavy with guilt and memory. Martha listened, then confessed softly, "I still set a plate for John every supper. I know he's gone, but it feels wrong not to." Their eyes met, two souls, both broken, both learning to breathe again. Then from the cradle, a sound soft, sudden, and bright. Baby Clara laughed, pure and small, and the room seemed to exhale. The storm still raged outside, but inside, something far greater had calmed, to hearts, finally remembering how to hope. Spring came quietly to the Wyoming plains, soft and slow, like forgiveness taking root. The snow melted from the rooftops, and the pastures turned green once more. At the Ward ranch, the fences stood mended, the barn freshly painted, and the sound of hammers and laughter replaced the silence that once haunted its halls. Elias worked the fields again, his shoulders straighter, his eyes lighter. Martha came by each morning with biscuits and coffee, her presence as natural as sunrise. They didn't speak of love, not yet, but the way they moved together feeding the cattle, tending the baby told its own story. Little Clara had grown rosy and strong, always stretching her arms toward Martha's gentle smile. Sometimes when the wind swept through the valley, carrying the scent of wildflowers and new grass, Elias would pause, listening. Somewhere between the laughter and the wind, he swore he could hear Clara's spirit smiling too. Sometimes the greatest rescues don't ride in on horseback or come wrapped in glory. They arrive quietly, with trembling hands and a heart willing to help. Out on the frontier, where hardship is as common as dust, kindness becomes its own kind of salvation. Elias Ward didn't find hope in riches or revenge, he found it in a neighbor's simple act. A bottle of warm milk offered on a cold morning. Compassion mended what grief had shattered, reminding us all that even the smallest kindness can turn a life around, or save one from the edge of despair. The firelight dims as the camera drifts slowly across the quiet ranch, now peaceful beneath the silver moon. Baby Clara sleeps soundly in her cradle, her small hand curled around the edge of a worn quilt. Outside, the wind hums low through the valley, no longer mournful, but alive. The narrator's voice softens, warm and reflective. Would you have opened the door to a stranger that morning? Or would you have knocked, knowing someone else's sorrow needed your courage more than your comfort? The question lingers in the stillness, an echo that feels personal, timeless. Then the music swells, gentle guitar strings carrying the sound of hope. If this story touched your heart, the voice continues. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who still believes in kindness, and subscribe for more heartfelt Western tales. Out here, every act of grace tells a story worth remembering.